Have you ever wondered what would happen if a talented creator put few restrictions on the use of their work for others to create derivative works? The Touhou Project and its history is an almost ideal creative renaissance of such a loose copyright philosophy, and the story behind its creation and growth is fascinating. Junya Ota, whom I'll refer to by his nickname Zun for the rest of this video, became interested in creating games when he was in high school. His dream was to create a different kind of shoot-'em-up game from what was on the market in the early to mid-90s. Rather than the common science fiction and military themes, he wanted to create a game with a miko and Shinto aesthetic. He was part of his school's orchestra at the time and originally wanted to create music for video games. But he didn't know anybody actually making games, so he decided to make his own games. In college, he majored in mathematics and created his first notable game for the PC 9800 series of computers in 1995. This game was called Highly Responsive to Prayers, the first game in a series that would eventually obtain a Guinness World Record for most prolific fan-based shooter series ever created. Highly Responsive to Prayers, or Touhou 1 as the series fans might call it, is also a very different kind of shooter compared to anything else at the time in 1997 and even to what the Touhou series would eventually become. But even at its earliest, the passion, creativity, and talent of its creator can be felt through experiencing the game. Whether it's the interesting character design, the difficulty scaling, or the surprisingly good soundtrack for something composed by a teenager in college. The easiest, if not most accurate way to describe Touhou 1's gameplay is to say it's like Arkanoid with some frenetic shooter elements. To me, it's a bit more like a puzzle action game. The main character, Shrine Maiden Reimu Hakurei, uses ofuda or inscribed sheets of paper to fire bullets which can destroy enemy bullets or bounce the yin-yang ball at enemy targets to damage or destroy them. She can also slide tackle the yin-yang ball or hit it with her gohei or wooden wand to bounce it. This game also introduced the difficulty level system for player selection that would appear in future games. Easy, normal, hard, and lunatic. If Reimu is hit by enemy bullets or the yin-yang ball, she'll lose a life. Reimu can use an emergency screen-wide bomb to get out of sticky situations too. There are 20 stages with a boss fight every 5 stages, and a route split after the 5th stage going to the Hell Path or the Makai Path. This game also introduced Reimu's first female yokai rival on the Hell Path, the Ghost Mima, who would also appear in future games. Touhou 1 marked the beginning of a Japanese naming scheme for the series that would continue, featuring the 2 Japanese characters for the word Touhou, followed by 3 characters for the name of the game, which in this case are Reiden. The Japanese name for Highly Responsive to Prayers, Touhou Reiden, is thought to be from Japan's oldest collection of Buddhist setsuwa, the Nihon Ryoiki, basically spoken early stories of Buddhist myths, legends, folktales, and anecdotes. Nihon Ryoiki itself is an abbreviation of Nihon Koku Genpo Zennaku Ryoiki, which translates to a chronicle of wondrous tales of good and evil in Japan. And if you're wondering, Reiden's literal translation to English would be more akin to Wondrous Tale, as opposed to its official title, Highly Responsive to Prayers. I think complexities like this are why people largely refer to the games in the Touhou series by number rather than name. Personally, I think the English titles are cool, in the same way I think the Tales series special attacks are cool in their literal English, even if they do sound like random words mixed together. While Zun showed off Touhou 1 in public for the first time at Tokyo University's 20th Hatoyama Matsuri, a local festival of Tokyo University, in November of 1996, it wasn't until August 1997, at the age of 19, that he sold Highly Responsive to Prayers alongside Touhou 2, Story of Eastern Wonderland, to the public at Japan's Comiket 52 as Zun Soft. The Story of Eastern Wonderland, or Touhou 2, was the first actual danmaku or bullet curtain shooting game in the Touhou series. This game defined the overall structure of many of Zun's future shooting games, with the player character controlling a character on a screen as it scrolls up. The player character has a hitbox a fraction of the size of their character. Power-ups, mid-bosses, and an unlockable extra stage were also features added to this game that became standard in future Touhou games. Zun cited Taito's Darius Gaiden as a gameplay influence of Story of Eastern Wonderland. 3 regular attack types and several spell card or bomb attacks are available to the player. Mima comes back from the first game, and Zun added more female characters to the game, including the other series mainstay, which Marisa Kirisame. She doesn't become playable until future games though. Again in 1997, Zun released the third game, Touhou Rimejiku, known in English as The Phantasmagoria of Dim Dream. In this game, Zun created a fun 2-player shooter where players indirectly combat each other by charging and releasing spell cards. The game had several modes, including a human versus human multiplayer mode, a human versus AI mode, an AI versus AI spectator mode, and a story mode. This shooter game had a split screen in which the two competitors would meet conditions through gameplay to attack the player on the other side of the screen with their unique spell cards. It's similar to competitive Tetris or Puyo Puyo, except with shooter gameplay. In 1998, the fourth game, Touhou Gensoukyou, or Lotus Land Story, was released. Following the gameplay style similar to Touhou 2, Lotus Land Story added Marisa Kirisame as a new playable character to the game. Marisa used narrow attacks with more power, while Reimu's attacks were weaker but had a wider spread. The scoring system also added some new features, with a graze counting bonus for players who got close to enemy bullets without getting hit. Dream items could be obtained to increase scoring potential, and the spell card bombs could be used to auto-collect items. Defeating bosses with lots of bullets on the screen also offered additional point rewards. This particular song from Lotus Land Story, Bad Apple, was fan remixed and became extraordinarily popular on Japanese streaming site Nico Nico Doga. Even on YouTube, it's managed to accumulate over 91 million views and will probably continue to get more as more and more people learn about the series. Touhou Kaikidan, literally translated to Bizarre Romantic Story, but officially Mystic Square in English, was released by Zune at the end of 1998 as the fifth game in the Touhou series. This was also the last game developed for the PC 98. This game features 4 playable characters: Reimu Hakurei, Marisa Kirisame, Mima, and Yuka Kazami. It inherits the risk-reward scoring system from Lotus Land Story, but it's also the first game to punish the player for using bombs. It was at about this time that Zune had graduated from college and was hired into Taito as a game programmer. Probably because he was busy working, it wasn't until 4 years later in 2002 that he was able to produce and release his next Touhou game. Touhou Komakyo, the sixth Touhou game, is also the first Touhou on the Windows PC platform. Known officially in English as Embodiment of Scarlet Devil, this game features Reimu Hakurei and Marisa Kirisame as the two playable characters. The characters have 2 different spell card types each, which look and behave differently when used. Both characters have a similar attack style to previous games, with Reimu's attacks being wider and weaker, while Marisa has narrow, more powerful attacks along with a bit more speed to compensate. Embodiment of Scarlet Devil has an auto item collection system if a character goes to the top of the screen with a full power bar, and a counter bomb system which will negate a hit if the bomb is activated a short time after taking the hit. Since this game was my first Touhou game way back in the day, I do have a bit more to say about it. The game added short cut-ins when opponents would use spell cards, and even showed the name of their spell card as it was being used, which I thought was a really cool touch that added a lot of character to all the different boss enemies in the game and made them more memorable for me. Future games did a really good job with this too, and naming the spell cards also made it easier for players to talk about the games too. One of my favorite Touhou fan games, Touhou Luna Nights, was themed around Embodiment of Scarlet Devil too, but we'll get to the amazing fan games later. Embodiment of Scarlet Devil is where the Touhou series really started to spread its wings outside of Japan, since it was a lot more easily accessible to Western audiences on the Windows platform than it was on the PC NX that Touhou 1 through 5 were stuck on. It was also very popular in Japan, and many of the characters in the game became fan favorites for playable characters in future Touhou games as well. A lot of future fan games also prominently feature characters like Cyrano, Sakuya, and Remilia. The enemy spell cards themselves had the same coolness factor that ultimate attacks do in a lot of games, and even if I had to use all of my own spell card bombs and survive with 0 lives left at the end of the extra stage, it still felt great the first time I completed this game on Lunatic. In 2003, Touhou Yoyomu was released. In English, this game became known as Perfect Cherry Blossom. In addition to Reimu and Marisa, Sakuya Izuyoi from the previous game is a playable character. Each character can choose from 2 spell cards. Perfect Cherry Blossom introduced a cherry scoring system with high scoring, also giving temporary shields and a faster acceleration of point gain. In Perfect Cherry Blossom, you could also focus to change your attacks and see your character's tiny hitbox. The game also added an incredibly useful cursor at the bottom of the screen to know where the boss is when there are bullets showered everywhere on the screen. One of my favorite things about this game are the poetic stage intros and the very springtime cherry blossom feel of the game's aesthetics overall. I love the stage 1 theme a lot too. Probably one of my favorite intros to any Touhou game. Touhou Suimuso, known in English as Immaterial and Missing Power, is the first of several Touhou fighting games co-developed by Zune and Twilight Frontier. The game is also called Touhou 7.5 due to chronologically taking place between Perfect Cherry Blossom and Touhou 8. Players can play in an arcade mode, a story mode, a human versus human mode, and a human versus AI mode. Spell cards serve as the ultimate attacks for the characters. Touhou Eiyasho, meaning Eternal Night Vignette from the East, was released in 2004. In English, this game is called Imperishable Night. It features 8 playable characters in 4 preset pairs. powers. One character fires normally and the other fires when focused. This game also added a last spell system for players and enemies. An enemy's last spell is a bonus spell card a player can attempt to oppose without risk of losing lives or bombs. A player's last spell is a secondary bomb spell that lasts longer and does more damage but eats up 2 bomb stacks. Imperishable Night added a gauge at the bottom left to show how human or yokai you are based on how much you focus in the game, which has other effects on the game too. You can also unlock a game mode where you can play as an individual instead of a pairing, and there are also branching paths depending on your choice of pairing at the beginning of the game as well. In 2005, Touhou Kaetsuga, known in English as Phantasmagoria of Flower View, was released as the 9th game in the Touhou series. Similar to Touhou 3, this game is a competitive versus shooter. In addition to the features from Touhou 3, this game has 4 spell card levels of increasing strength. The 4th spell card level summons an avatar of your character for your opponent to deal with. I've personally had a lot of fun playing Phantasmagoria of Flower View with friends and even against the AI. One of the more interesting Touhou games I've played was Touhou Bunkacho, known in English as Shoot the Bullet or Touhou 9.5. Zoom produced this game to tie in with Bohemian Archive in Red, the first official Touhou series fanbook written by Zune with art by Kasugarin and others. The fanbook also came with a music CD with tracks from Phantasmagoria of Flower View. Shoot the Bullet's sole main character is Gensoukyou reporter Aya Shamemaru, who is featured in the fanbook. She can move at 3 different speeds. Unlike other Touhou danmaku games, the player is focused mainly on avoidance with the goal of charging a photo shot to capture the yokai's spell cards and bullet patterns. Various elements like what is captured in the photograph affect scoring, and photography can also be used defensively to clear out bullets. The next game, Touhou Fujinroku, literally meaning Eastern Wind God Chronicles, was released in 2007. Known as Mountain of Faith in English, Reimu Hakurei and Marisa Kirisame are the playable main characters. They each have 3 weapon types but no personalized bombs. Instead of a more powerful shot, picking up power-up items adds option orbs to the characters that behave differently depending on the character and weapon type. Options are eaten up when the player uses a bomb. The game's unique faith scoring system uses a faith gauge visible at the bottom left. The higher it goes, due to skilled play, the more points players will score for their actions. Touhou Hisoten, known in English as Scarlet Weather Rhapsody, is the next Touhou fighting game developed by Zune and Twilight Frontier. It's also called Touhou 10.5 for taking place between Mountain of Faith and Touhou 11. The most dramatic change between this game and Touhou Immaterial and Missing Power is the addition of Flight, a 20-card deck system, and a weather system. In 2007, Zune left his programming job at Taito to work on the Touhou series full-time since it was now popular enough for him to devote more time to it. Touhou Chireiden, known as Subterranean Animism in English, was released in 2008. Reimu and Marisa are the playable characters, each with 3 different weapon types representing yokai assisting them from above ground. The option satellite system from Mountain of Faith returns, but each bomb has a different behavior this time, with some causing different gameplay effects. Grazing is heavily emphasized in this game for scoring rewarding players with auto collection and high scores. In 2009, Touhou Seiden Sen was released. Known in English as Undefined Fantastic Object, this game features 3 playable characters, Reimu, Marisa, and Sanae. Each character has a choice of 2 weapon types to begin the game with, and the bomb system from the games prior to Mountain of Faith returns. This game's unique gameplay system lies in collecting colored UFOs for bombs, life pieces, or score bonuses. Touhou 12.3, or Touhou Hiso Tensoku Chodokyu Ginyoru no Nazo Ooe, is a standalone expansion to fighting game Touhou Scarlet Rhapsody that can be combined with that game to unlock system cards for characters, new spell cards for existing characters, new playable characters, and more weather types. I couldn't find an official English title for this game, but its literal meaning is unperceiving of natural law, chase the enigma of the gargantuan Guignol. Most people probably just say Touhou 12.3 or Touhou Hiso Tensoku. Double spoiler, Touhou Bunkacho, literally translated to Double Spoiler Oriental Cultural Album, is known simply as Double Spoiler in English. This game is a sequel to Shoot the Bullet with similar avoidance and photography gameplay. In addition to the first game's Aya, you can also play as Hatate Hime Kaido after unlocking her. This game is also known as Touhou 12.5. Another game to tie in with the manga project was produced as Touhou 12.8. Yosei Daisenso Touhou Sangetsuse, known simply as Fairy Wars in English, is another unique danmaku entry in the Touhou series. The game's story was designed to tie into the Touhou manga series Strange and Bright Nature Deity. The gameplay follows Cerno through a series of stages, but instead of shooting or taking pictures, she freezes bullets and can charge her freezes by holding in the button to freeze. The game has only 3 stages, but there are 6 routes depending on the order of the stages cleared, and also a 4th stage that has to be unlocked. One other unique thing about Fairy Wars is that the illustrations were drawn by Makoto Hirasaka instead of Zune. The 13th official Touhou game, Touhou Shinrebyo, was released in 2011, known in English as 10 Desires. The game's 4 playable characters are Reimu, Marisa, Sanae Kochiya, and Yomu Kanpaku. Just like the other mainline titles, the game is a danmaku danmaku shooter, but this game adds a trance system. Throughout gameplay, the trance gauge will fill up, and when it's full, the player can activate a trance mode for temporary invulnerability, increased attack power, and score bonuses. If the player takes a hit when their gauge is over 1/3 full, they will get a moment of trance before losing a life. Touhou Shinkido Hopeless Masquerade, known simply as Hopeless Masquerade in English, is a new fighting game in the Touhou franchise developed by Zune and Twilight Frontier. Unlike the prior fighting games, the characters in this game fly when they're fighting. This game is also called Touhou 13.5. Touhou Kishinjo Double Dealing Character, also known as Double Dealing Character in English, was released in 2013 as the 14th official danmaku game. Reimu, Marissa, and Sakuya are the game's playable characters. And honestly, I couldn't find anything too special or unique about this game's gameplay compared to other games in the Touhou series. But being able to play as Sakuya Izayoi again after so many years is pretty special in my opinion. The characters do have 2 attack types to choose from, and a few unique special abilities like Reimu's smaller hitbox or Sakuya slowing down item fall speed. The Touhou Project was at its peak popularity in the doujin world at this point in 2013, dominating Japan's largest fan-made media market, Comiket, with fan works based on the Touhou series. Danmaku Amanojaku, Impossible Spell Card, known simply as Impossible Spell Card in English, is also Touhou 12.3. Seija Kijin is the player character who uses 9 different cheat items to survive and clear her opponent's spell cards. 2 cheat items can be selected before the spell cards, and the items have the maximum amount of uses during the spell card. These items allow Seija to do things like teleport, create bullet decoys, have a body double die in her place, clear the screen of bullets, time a bomb, provide various levels of invincibility, or use a superpowered attack at close range. Touhou Shinpidoku Urban Legend in Limbo is the 5th Touhou fighting game with similar mechanics to Hopeless Masquerade. It's simply called Urban Legend in Limbo in English and is also known as Touhou 14.5. Zune also co-produced this game with Twilight Frontier, like all of the other side-view fighting games in the Touhou series. 2015 marked the release of the next main danmaku shooter, Touhou Kanjuden Legacy of Lunatic Kingdom, known as Legacy of Lunatic Kingdom in English. This game, like many other Touhou games, emphasizes grazing to make items fall slower. Also, your performance in the game is graded after each chapter with various rewards for skilled play. Legacy of Lunatic Kingdom added a new game mode in addition to the traditional legacy mode called Point Device Mode that gives infinite retries but with only 1 life per chapter. Since chapters are divided into stages and bosses, this mode also makes it possible to leave the game in the middle of a point device run and come back to it another time. Touhou 15.5, Touhou Hyoibana Antimony of Common Flowers, is the next Touhou fighting game following the footsteps of Hopeless Masquerade and Urban Legend in Limbo. However, this game adds a master and slave tag team system to the game with slaves lending the masters their power. Touhou 16, Hidden Star in 4 Seasons, was the first Touhou game to release on Steam in 2017. Reimu, Cerno, Aya, and Marissa are the playable characters. They each have their own shot type. There are also 4 sub-weapons to choose from based on their original owners. Other than that, there's nothing too notable about the structure of the game. Violet Detector, Secret Sealing Nightmare, which is known as Violet Detector in English, is Touhou 16.5. It's another photography-themed danmaku game with main characters Sumideko Usami instead of Aya Shamemaru. In 2019, Wily Beast and Weakest Creature was released as the newest official danmaku shooter in the Touhou series. Reimu, Marissa, and Yomu are the playable characters in this game. Animal spirits are used as sub-weapons in the game and players can choose one from the 3. The wolf spirit powers up the focused shot, the otter powers up the bombs, and the eagle powers up the player's unfocused shot. Each spirit also has a roaring mode that will activate after players have collected enough spirit tokens through gameplay. During roaring mode, the background darkens and various special actions become available. Touhou Goyoku Ibun Suibotsushita Chinshu Jigoku was the next fighting game released by Zune and Twilight Frontier. It was called Sunken Fossil World in English and is also known as Touhou 17.5. This game returns the characters to the ground as opposed to the more flight-based fighting systems the prior fighting games had. In 2021, Touhou Koryudo Unconnected Marketeers, known in English as Unconnected Marketeers, was released as the next official danmaku shooter in the series. This game features a unique currency system that lets players collect and use currency to purchase cards at the end of stages that can give extra lives, spell cards, or access to abilities based on characters from past games. Players can play as Reimu, Marissa, Sakuya, or Sanae. The game that followed, Bullet Files Black Market, known simply as 100th Black Market in English, is something of a sequel to the previous game. Players control Marissa Kirisame and challenge stages repeatedly to collect abilities ability cards. This game is also known as Touhou 18.5. And finally, the newest official danmaku Touhou game available as of the time I'm making this video is Touhou Juoen, known in English as Unfinished Dream of All Living Ghosts. This game refreshingly brings back the danmaku style of Phantasmagoria of Dim View and Phantasmagoria of Flower View with the split-screen competitive danmaku shooting. Now that's just the game series, but it's called Touhou Project and not simply the Touhou series for a reason. There's a lot more than just the games. ZUN has also released 10 music CDs with arrangements of tracks from the games, which often also include manuals written by ZUN documenting activities of the secret Sealing Club of Necromancers that discuss topics related to Gensoukyou, the world of Touhou. ZUN also released a 5-volume collection of PC-98 soundtracks for the PC-98 Touhou games that include some unused songs for the games. Soundtracks for Twilight Frontiers fighting games were also released with song arrangements. ZUN wrote or produced a multitude of manuals, novels, short stories, manga, fanbooks, and media projects around his games and the world of Gensoukyou over the years. Bohemian Archive in Japanese Red, Seasonal Dream Vision, Perfect Memento in Strict Sense, The Grimoire of Marissa, Symposium of Post-Mysticism, Alternative Facts in Eastern Utopia, and The Grimoire of Usami are all official or semi-official fanbooks for the series. Curiosities of Lotus Asia are a series of short stories told from the perspective of Rinosuke Morichika, one of the only male characters in the series and proprietor of Korindo, an antique store in Gensoukyou. Touhou Sangetsusei, or Three Fairies, which I touched on briefly earlier as being related to Touhou 12.8 Fairy Wars, is a 4-part manga series following the three fairies Sunny Milk, Luna Child, and Star Sapphire as they cause mischief and live life in Gensoukyou. ZUN also released tankobon volumes of the manga with a CD including new tracks. Touhou Bogetsusho, or Ephemeral Moon Vignette, is a collection of yonkoma strips, a manga, a CD, and a novel that continue the story of Touhou 8 Imperishable Night. Wild and Horned Hermit is a manga series about a mysterious hermit, Kasen Ibaraki, who descends on Gensoukyou to dispense knowledge to its residents. Forbidden Scrollery is the first Touhou manga series to be officially translated into English. The story revolves around Kosuzu Motori, a collector of rare and dangerous demon books in Gensoukyou. Strange Creators of Outer World is an official Touhou Project magazine featuring interviews with ZUN and other doujin creators. Cheating Detective Satori is a manga series written by ZUN, and another manga series called Lotus Eaters was written by him as well. Now, while there are definitely enough official games and accompanying official media to warrant the existence of this video, the most interesting thing to me is what fans and media producers have done with ZUN's world and characters. ZUN had very loose guidelines with what other creators could do with his IP. The main sticking points were not to commercialize his work outside of doujin or fan-made work, so fans could actually sell derivative works as long as it wasn't a part of a huge company, and more like something that would appear at Comic-Con. Of course, there were a lot of adult derivative works, but there were also a ton of high-quality creative fan works created as a result of this loose copyright policy as well. At the peak of Touhou's popularity in Japan in 2013, over 2,272 doujin circles, or fan groups, were dedicated to Touhou at Comic-Con. Some early fan games developed using Touhou IP were Komajo Densetsu, Scarlet Symphony, a Symphony of the Night Metroidvania-style Touhou game based on Embodiment of Scarlet Devil, which also had a sequel. The first and second game were recently made available on Steam as Komajo Remilia, Scarlet Symphony, and Komajo Remilia 2, Stranger's Requiem. I've played both games many years ago before they were released on Steam, and they were quite fun for their time, but I think the much more modern Touhou Luna Nights is a better Touhou-flavored Metroidvania. Age of Ethanols was created and is based on Age of Empires, and Touhou Puppet Dance Performance was made based on the Pokemon games. I've already talked about Lotus Land Stories' Bad Apple Legendary Song Remix. Iosis also created flash music videos of Touhou music remixes like Marissa Stole the Precious Thing and Cerno's Perfect Math Class. Toby Fox, creator of Undertale, cited musical influences from ZUN's Touhou games. I suspect the bullet avoidance battle system in Undertale also took some influence from Touhou. Reimu Hakurei and Yuyuko Sagyoji made cameo appearances in Square Enix's Lord of Vermilion RE2. Fan-made anime of Touhou also got popular and even included participation from famous voice actresses like Rie Tanaka. The Touhou Project lost only to Nintendo's Wii Sports when it was nominated for Japan's 11th Annual Media Arts Awards in Entertainment, an extraordinary achievement for a doujin creation like the Touhou Project. The Hakurei Shrine Reitaisai started in 2004 as the largest Touhou-only doujin convention in Japan. While it isn't official, ZUN himself named it and used it to distribute trial versions of his games. Touhou spearheaded a renaissance of doujin works, and the shooting games that were a flagship of the media project were easily the most popular shooting game series in Japan, when other companies making shooting games either dissolved or moved on to other things. This is also despite its lack of extreme commercial marketing and status as a doujin project. While Touhou may not be as popular now as it was at its peak years ago, it is still very relevant and discussed discussions of video game danmaku shooters, fan-made Japanese games, memorable video game music, and popular doujin games. Fan developers today continue to use Zun's Touhou IP to create pretty much every genre of game imaginable using his world and characters. From store simulators like Touhou Mystia's Izakaya, which is sitting at a whopping 98% user score on Steam right now, to Shin Megami Tensei JRPG rips like Touhou Artificial Dream in Arcadia, which is also sitting at a whopping 98% user score on Steam. Metroidvanias like Touhou Luna Nights and the aforementioned Komajo Densetsu exist. New Super Marissa Land, which is basically a Super Mario Bros. Spoof, is also a thing I've personally played and actually kind of enjoyed too. Anyways, there are way too many fan games to list verbally, so I left a screenshot of everything Google fed me with a simple search. If there's a genre of game you enjoy, there's most likely a Touhou version of it, and if there isn't yet, there probably will be in a few years. I'm sure if I did the search in Japanese, there'd be even more stuff out there. Doing YouTube searches for Touhou music remixes, music videos, and fan-made animes will give you many fun results as well. Needless to say, for a fan-made doujin game with humble beginnings, Zun's Touhou series has achieved a level of popularity large media companies only dream of. And as long as Zun continues to let people go wild with his IP, I don't see this changing anytime in the future. While I don't consider myself the largest fan of Touhou, the current shooter games have a sort of consistent charm to them with their soundtracks and gameplay that keep me interested in new official entries and related doujin fan games. The Touhou danmaku games are like short poems. They don't overstay their welcome, and a skilled player can complete most of them in well under an hour. They open up your imagination with their music and settings. The spell cards and unique music composed for each boss are aesthetically and rhythmically awesome. They really define the characters' personalities. I'll personally never forget my first experience with Remilius Scarlet's Scarlet Meister on Lunatic difficulty in Embodiment of Scarlet Devil. Zun's brilliance really shines when you've played enough of his danmaku games and analyzed their design. You realize how he's synchronized parts of his songs to the appearance of tougher enemies in the game, or exciting parts of the music to the possible moments a boss will use their spell cards in the boss themes. Plenty of games blend their BGMs to the mood of their games, but I think it's because Zun is the artist, programmer, designer, and composer all at once. It just harmonizes so well. Because the game is mostly on rails, it's not too difficult to do this, but it's a detail I definitely appreciate. If you've only played the games like I have, you wouldn't even realize Zun's written so much developing the characters in these games. On the surface, the stories to most of these games is very simple. Bad things happen at the Hakurei Shrine or Gensoukyou, and Reimu has to fix them. It's almost like how Adol Christin begins a lot of his adventures in Ys after being shipwrecked. To me, the games just looked like a bunch of cute girls with awesome background music shooting loads of pretty and deadly fireworks and lasers at each other when I played them. The dialogue is short and cutesy, but nothing particularly memorable for me at least. However, I think a lot of that written work on the Touhou series that's only really openly and easily available to the Japanese side of the Touhou fanbase is one of the huge drivers of all the doujin fanworks for the Touhou series. Zun himself acknowledged how the Touhou characters have elaborate stories, but in-game little detail is given to them, saying that danmaku is how the story and characters are communicated. He also stated danmaku is meant to be beautiful and aesthetically pleasing, so he made the majority of characters female. Zun believes there is a feminine charm to danmaku, which would be lost with male characters, and that the presence of female characters should not be interpreted as fan service. The shooter genre has definitely declined over the years as companies decided the cost to make them didn't warrant their sales. In a niche genre that hasn't evolved in years due to the constraints of its characteristics, Touhou managed to succeed with its unique setting and approach to admittedly mostly samey shooter gameplay. You could say it was a great opportunity for Zun to jump in with the Touhou Project and take over where the big companies were leaving. As previously mentioned, Zun himself used to work at Taito as a game programmer from 1998 to 2007 before leaving to work on Touhou full-time. No doubt his background in mathematics helped him create all those dangerous and beautiful bullet patterns for all the yokai in his games. After his 5th game in the Touhou series, starting with Embodiment of Scarlet Devil, Zun changed his brand name from Zun Soft to Team Shanghai Alice to embody the essence of an Asian city with Eastern and Western influences, as well as the feminine gothic Lolita image the name Alice evokes. This was also meant to reflect the vibe he hoped to give with the Touhou series. Zun prefers to make his games alone, but he has worked with other groups on the fighting games and with other people for many of his other media projects. On X, he's also known as the Hakurei Kannushi, or Hakurei Shinto priest. Zun's thoughts on using generative artificial intelligence for the game creation process are particularly philosophical. He lauds AI's efficiency, but states that the beasts are the ones building a world of mental enrichment and a palpable sense of life. AI is in direct opposition to the imperfection, organicity, and the importance of the process passionate creators pour into their doujin works. To me, this just means the imperfections in people's creations are what make them special, unique, and different, something you don't see in an AI creation meant to deliver perfect results with well-crafted prompts. Everybody finds Touhou eventually. For me, it was in the early 2000s with Embodiment of Scarlet Scarlet Devil when I was actively searching for some niche Japanese games to play. For many people, they probably stumble upon music from the games on the internet. Still others may have discovered the series from VTubers streaming the game or YouTubers talking about it. And if nothing else, their friends probably gush about a Touhou game they've played recently or went back to after some time away from the series. So did you know about the Touhou series before watching this video? And if so, what was your introduction to the series? Let me know in the comments section below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.